season. Before we get into it, make sure you leave a like on the video, comment what you agree with and disagree with from this video, and also make sure you subscribe so you don't miss more content over here at Couch Casual. But without further ado, let's get into the first team, first division being the AFC East, and the first team is the Buffalo Bills. And my breakout player for the Bills is wide receiver Curtis Samuel. Now, Curtis Samuel, he was drafted by the Panthers, had an okay start, and then he went to Washington, where he's had two 600-yard seasons, his last two healthy seasons. But why I think he'll be the breakout player for the Bills is when he had his best season in 2020, where I think he had 1,000 scrimmage yards on the Panthers. His offensive coordinator was Joe Brady, who is now his offensive coordinator in Buffalo, and he now gets the best quarterback he's ever played with in Josh Allen. And all he's fighting against is Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, and Mac Hollins. I don't see why Curtis Samuel can't be the number one receiver. And if he were to get 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns, that would be his best season in the NFL. And I think that would signify a breakout for him. And that's why Curtis Samuel is my Buffalo Bills breakout player for this season. Next team is the Dolphins. And I have chose safety Javon Holland. Now, he's not as experienced as a guy like Curtis Samuel. He's had some okay seasons for the Dolphins. He was a little bit injured last year, only played 12 games. I got the stats here. He had 2 interceptions his first 2 years, and then 1 interception, actually, that pick 6 that happened on, I think, Black Friday. But I feel like he's just poised for that 4th-year breakout. You see a lot of guys break out in like their 3rd, 4th season. And Holland he's already 24, or he's only 24. He hasn't had an incredible season, so I think he may not. He's played well, obviously. You can't just look at interception numbers, but he's played well. But I feel like this is the season where he's going to break out into a Pro Bowl caliber player. So that's why I chose Javon Holland for my Dolphins player. Next team we have is the New York Jets, and I have chose edge rusher Jermaine Johnson. Jermaine Johnson was drafted 26 overall 2 years ago in the first round from the Jets. I believe he was in the Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner draft class that the Jets had. And so far, he had his rookie year, he had 2.5 sacks. But then he had 7.5 the next year. Actually made the Pro Bowl, probably as a replacement. But it counts. He made the Pro Bowl. But why I think he could break out into like a 14-plus sack guy, 12, 13-plus sack player, is because the Jets this offseason, they pretty much swapped Bryce Huff for Hassan Reddick, who Hassan Reddick has been a great pass rusher in the last couple seasons. Now, I know there's the whole contract dispute going on with him, but he had 11 sacks last year in Philly, 16 sacks the year before that. So he's obviously a really good pass rusher, and if he, actually plays for the Jets, Jermaine Johnson will have Hassan Reddick on the opposite side of him, not to mention Quinnen Williams as well. There's not going to be much attention towards Jermaine Johnson in terms of the pass rushing. So I feel like he'll get a lot of opportunities, and that's where I think his numbers can really increase this upcoming season, and that's why I have him as my Jets breakout player. Next, for the next team we have is the Patriots, and I'm going with Christian Gonzalez. Now, he may not. This may seem like a weird pick because he hasn't really played much, and when he played, he was really good because he was the Patriots' 17th pick last year. He only played 4 games because of that injury he had, but he was probably gonna win Defensive Rookie of the Year if he played a whole season. At least in my opinion, in only 4 games, he had 1 pick and 3 passes defended, or pass breakups. He also had a sack as well. So I feel like when you look at the 4 games he played, how good he was, I feel like with a whole year of learning under the NFL, an NFL defense, watching it with the coaching and all that, I feel like this may not be like a surprise breakout. Like if he played a whole season, the stats he has next year might be the stats he would have had his rookie year. So obviously it's going to increase if he plays the whole season. But I feel like even if he played his whole rookie year, the stats in his second year would still be significantly better. And I think he's going to become one of the top corners. Because you see a lot of the top corners are young guys like Surtain and Gardner, even Jalen Johnson's a little younger. Trent McDuffie. You see all these young corners. I feel like Gonzalez can definitely join that group next season. Next team we have is the Baltimore Ravens. And I have Rashad Bateman. Now I wanted to initially have it be Zay Flowers. But I feel like if someone were to predict their breakout player for the Ravens, they would pick Zay Flowers. Most people would pick Zay Flowers. So I wanted to be a little bit different here. Bateman, he was the Ravens' first-round pick in 2021. He's yet to get 1,000 yards. He's yet to get over his career high was 500 yards in 2021, and his career high in touchdowns was 2 his second year. But he didn't really play much his second year. Like when you look at his yards per game, it was the highest of his career that second season. I think Lamar, now I know he's gotten slimmer, but I think his passing is still getting better. Zay Flowers, I still think will get better. You still have Mark Andrews. Those are targets, and those are options that can sort of get the attention over Bateman. I wouldn't be surprised if Bateman has 800 yards, 5 touchdowns this season. And that would be a substantial increase in what he's done so far in his career. Because to me, it feels like Bateman's been in the league forever. But he's only 24, and he's only played 3 seasons. And plenty of people take to their 4th season to really make that big leap. And I think Rashad Bateman can be that. So I think both Ravens receivers will actually have massive increases. But I'm gonna mention the one that probably people don't talk about, and that is Rashad Bateman. Next up, my Bengals breakout player is wide receiver. Let me see how you pronounce this. It's Andre Iosivas. Andre Iosivas. He was a 6th-round pick last year out of Princeton. Now, he didn't do too much. He only started 1 game. He had a pretty good performance that 1 game. I think it was like the last game of the season. But I don't know. I just have a feeling. I know they obviously have Chase, T. Higgins, and they drafted the Alabama guy, Burton, I think is his name. But I don't know. I have a feeling about Iosivas that he's going to have a really solid. Now he's not going to break out to the levels of maybe a Gonzalez, a Jermaine Johnson, Javon Holland. But if he has a 500-yard, 3-touchdown season, I would not be surprised at all. And I would consider that a breakout because he's a 6th-round pick. He only started 1 game. Only had 25 targets the whole year for 15 catches. Yet he had 4 touchdowns. So he averaged more than or I don't know the numbers there, but he had 4 touchdowns on 15 receptions, which is pretty good. Um, so I feel like his breakout's going to be a little smaller, but I feel like this season, a lot more people will know who Andre Yoshivas is. So that's why I picked him for my breakout player for the Bengals. Next, we have the Browns, and I'm going with cornerback Martin Emerson Jr. He was their 3rd-round pick 2 years ago. He only started 6 games his rookie year, didn't get an interception. But then last year, he started 12 games and ended up with 4 picks and 14 pass breakups. He's playing obviously alongside a great corner, Denzel Ward. And you just noticed the slight improvement. He started 6 games his rookie year, then he started 12. I feel like there's a chance that he's going to start every game if he's healthy. Because right now he's their 2nd corner on the depth chart. So he could start every game. And what's saying he can't? He had 1 pick for every 3 games he started. So maybe he ends up with 5 to 6 interceptions this year and maybe 20 plus pass breakups. I feel like a lot of people are high on Martin Emerson. I'm definitely one of them, and I could easily see a breakout for him. And then next we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this is maybe more of an obvious one or not as much. Doesn't really go with the trend of the other guys, but it's George Pickens, the wide receiver. He was their 2nd-round pick 2 years ago. We all know the crazy season he had last year, the 1,000 yards, the 18 yards per reception, 67 yards per game, 5 touchdowns. He was doing that with Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph. Now he has Russell Wilson, who had a pretty decent season last year. Who knows, maybe he gets Justin Fields, who was able to get DJ Moore a good season, even though it is DJ Moore. I feel like George Pickens had such a big leap from his rookie year to his 2nd year with the same quarterbacks. So now you give him better quarterbacks. He is the true guy because Deontay Johnson's now on the Panthers. He's the number 1. He has good quarterback play. He's definitely a 1,500 8 to 10 touchdown type of player I could see. I could definitely see him having that type of season. And Mike Tomlin just got extended. I don't think that means anything, but I could definitely see Pickens turning into one of the better receivers after this season. Next player we have the Texans player. And for the Texans, I have chose linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair. He's 26. He's entering his 6th season. Let me see when he was drafted. He went to FAU, which is kind of fun. But he played his first 4 seasons on the Niners behind Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, but he played under DeMeco Ryans, who was the defensive coordinator at the time. He then leaves San Francisco, and he goes to Tennessee, where he has his best season. He has 163 total tackles. He got a fumble recovery, 2 sacks as well. He has his best season as a free agent. He then now goes to Houston, where the head coach is now DeMeco Ryans. I'm pretty sure that was the main reason why he went to Houston in the first place. Now, I know he did have 163 tackles, 9 TFLs as well. But I feel like his tackle numbers I don't think will increase too much. It's hard to increase from 163, but I could just see him being a much better linebacker this season. I didn't really know who to pick for the Texans as well. I know because people probably want to pick C.J. Stroud, but I feel like he had such a good first year that I don't know how much he's going to get better from year 1 to year 2. I feel like his jump will happen like year 3, year 4. I wanted to pick Tank Dell. I was close to picking him, but I couldn't really find because Nico Collins potentially, because Diggs is probably not going to have a massive jump at whatever age he is. So I wanted to go with one I feel like people aren't talking about, and that is Azeez Al-Shaair. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Then next for the Colts, I have quarterback Anthony Richardson. We all know Anthony Richardson. His season was cut short last year after that shoulder surgery or shoulder injury that he had. But when he was on the field, he was incredible. 3 passing touchdowns. 4 rushing touchdowns in just 4 games played. Now he's got Adonai Mitchell as well on his team. You still got Michael Pittman. The offensive staff is pretty much the same with Shane Steichen, I believe. You still have Jonathan Taylor. I think Richardson is poised for, again, kind of like a Christian Gonzalez type breakout, where part of it is because he just didn't play very much. But I think Richardson's going to be one of the best quarterbacks, especially if fantasy players, one of the best fantasy quarterbacks. But that's just, he was like the 12th best fantasy quarterback despite only playing 4 games or something like that. So I think a lot of people would pick Anthony Richardson, and that is also who I am going to pick as well. However, I feel like the next pick is a little interesting one from the Jaguars. I'm going with Trevor Lawrence as my breakout player from the Jags. We all know first overall pick in 2021, generational talent, and then he goes into a terrible situation and has a terrible season. 12 touchdowns to 17 interceptions and only 3,600 yards. But then he comes back the next year when Doug Peterson is his coach, and he throws for 4,025 touchdowns and only 8 picks. But then this third season, he kind of took a step back. His interception numbers went back up. He had 14 picks, only 21 touchdowns. His yards stayed relatively the same, but he kind of regressed a little bit. And I feel like now they did lose Calvin Ridley, but they signed Gabe Davis. They drafted Brian Thomas out of LSU. They still have Travis Etienne. Evan Ingram had a great season last year. I could see this being the year where Trevor Lawrence finally proves why he was this almost generational prospect coming out of Clemson. And I think he is going to have one of the most passing yards in the league. Like, he's going to be up there, I think, in passing yards. And I think he'll get his interceptions back down and maybe even throw over 25 touchdowns. I think he'll have a career year in every single statistical category. I don't know about wins for the Jags because they're in a pretty good division, but I'm going with Trevor Lawrence as my Jaguars breakout player. Then for the Titans, I'm going to go with an interesting one. I didn't even know Kenneth Murray signed with the Titans until I was figuring out who I was going to put for the Titans, and then I saw him on the team. But I like Kenneth Murray. He was a first-round pick in 2020, so he was picked a long time ago. And he hasn't had the best season. He had 100 tackles his rookie season. And then he had 100 combined in his next 2 seasons, but then bounced back with another 100 tackle season and 3 sacks and 1 pick this year. So he's coming off his best season, I would say, since his rookie year at least. And He's now in Tennessee. Not many people have high hopes for him. Like, I think a lot of people are probably ready to give up on him, including the Chargers. But he got that chance with the Titans. I feel like he's going to prove a lot of people wrong and maybe have the type of season that Aziz Al-Shaair had for the Titans last year. So that is why I'm going with Kenneth Murray for the Titans. And then we're going to go with another linebacker here. I'm going to go with the Chiefs' Leo Chanel as my breakout player for the Chiefs. I could have went with Rashee Rice. I almost thought about putting Marquise Brown as well, or like a guy like Karlaftis too. But I wanted to go with Leo Chanel. And it almost isn't just Leo Chanel. It's kind of the Chiefs linebackers as a whole. Drew Tranquill, Nick Bolton, and Leo Chanel. I think that linebacking core as a whole is going to take a massive increase this season. But he hasn't but I decided to pick Leo Chanel because he hasn't really played much. He's only started 18 games in his first 2 seasons. He's a 3rd-round pick out of Wisconsin. I don't know. I feel like I just have a feeling that he's going to be the second best linebacker on that team behind Nick Bolton, obviously. Nick Bolton's the guy there. But I feel like he can take over Drew Tranquill's spot. And I think he could have a massive increase in production. Because Tranquill's 28 already. So I feel like he'll be the number 2 guy there in that linebacker room and really take a step up. And that's why I have him as my Chiefs breakout player. Then we get to the Chargers. And I'm going to go with Asante Samuel, corner, who was their 2nd-round pick 3 years ago. He's entering his 4th season. I don't know if they are going to pick up his 5th-year option or not. He's had 2 interceptions every year, about just over 10 pass breakups every season. But he's entering his 4th year, that pivotal year that we've talked about. He's obviously related to the Asante Samuel Sr., who was a very good player. And I just have a feeling that this is the year. Him with Derwin James could be one of the better corner safety duos in football next year. And that's why I'm going to go with Asante Samuel. And then the next team in the AFC West, we have the Raiders, and I'm going with Zamir White. Zamir White was a 4th-round pick 2 years ago. He didn't start a single game last year, but then, or 2 years ago, his rookie year. But then last year, he was given a bit of an opportunity. He was able to start for 4 games, and in the season total, he had 450 yards and 1 touchdown. He didn't obviously do that much. However, part of that was because Josh Jacobs was the guy there. But he's no longer on the team. Outside of Zamir White, it's Alexander Mattison and Amir Abdullah at the running back position. Zamir White, I think, clearly is the guy for the Raiders. Because the games that he started, he had 100 yards, 70 yards, and then his last game was 100 yards as well. He had a game where he averaged 6.6 yards a carry with his 2nd game, I believe, starting to finish off the season. And he is now the guy. When I watched Zamir White last season, I understood why he didn't get the touches originally, because Josh Jacobs is really good. But you could see how good that Zamir White could be. And it's something with these late-round pick running backs. For example, recently, Isaiah Pacheco, who was a very late pick at the running back position, has now become one of the better running backs. It's just a thing that happens, and I think one of the next late round running backs that's going to take that step because they now get the opportunities is Zamir White. I almost picked Aiden O'Connell to be my Raiders breakout player, but I just don't know if he's going to play. They might play Minshew, which I'm not mad at because Minshew obviously has had a pretty good season for the Colts, but I knew I'm pretty confident that Zamir White is going to start for most of the season, if not the whole season, if he's healthy, and so that's why I wanted to go with him as the Raiders breakout player. And then lastly for the AFC, and we have the Broncos player, which I'm going with Adam Troutman, the tight end out of Dayton, who was a third-round pick originally by the Saints. He obviously was behind Taysom Hill in New Orleans, at least the last few years. He didn't get over 300 yards while he was at New Orleans. He didn't even do that in Denver. But I feel like, again, this is going to be more of the smaller breakout, but I could see him getting 500 yards, 5 touchdowns. You have Zach Wilson and Bo Nix as your quarterbacks. They might want to rely on their tight end. And Adam Troutman's a solid tight end. So I feel like they also have Greg Dulcich as well. So maybe this is another thing like the Chiefs where the tight end room as a whole just takes them a step up. But I chose the starter when I looked at the depth chart, which was Adam Troutman. He was a good player out of Dayton. He was a third-round pick. But I just think he's going to be relied on by Wilson and Nix being the security blanket. And I think he could actually have a pretty solid season for the Broncos. And now we move on to the NFC. And the first team we have is the Eagles. And my breakout player for the Eagles is safety Reed Blankenship. Now, Blankenship didn't his rookie year. He only started 4 games. But this most recent season, he started every game he played in. He had 3 picks, 11 pass breakups, 113 tackles, 2 TFLs. He had a very good season. Now, I'm pretty sure James Bradbury was taking snaps at safety. Who knows what Cooper DeJean, what position they're going to have. But they still have Slay. They drafted Quinyon Mitchell. It's a really good secondary if guys like Slay and Bradbury can kind of get back to their performances and their abilities from like 2 years ago. It can be a pretty good secondary. And Blankenship being one of the starting safeties, you saw his first year as one of the guys at the safety position for the Eagles. He had a really good year, and I could just see him taking that year 3 jump with a whole year of starting under his belt. And I can see him having a very good season for the Eagles. Next, we have the Cowboys, and we got another tight end. I'm going with Jake Ferguson as my Cowboys breakout player. He was a 4th-round pick 2 years ago. Didn't play much his first year, but he's coming off a Pro Bowl season, actually, where he had 700 yards, 71 catches, and 5 touchdowns, which is a pretty good season. And I just think he'll take a natural year 3 progression. I know progression isn't always linear, but he had a decent rookie season, got a lot more opportunities, 80 more targets, had a much better season, Pro Bowl season, and I could just see him taking that next jump, maybe even getting 1,000 yards potentially. So that's who I'm going with for the Cowboys. Then next for the Commanders, I'm going to go with safety Jeremy Chin. Now, Jeremy Chin was a 2nd-round pick in 2020 by the Panthers. He had a very good rookie season. 100 tackles, 2 touchdowns, 2 fumble recovery touchdowns, a pick as well, 2 forced fumbles. He had a pretty solid second year, but I feel like the last 2 years he just didn't get utilized properly. They just weren't playing him. I know they had Woods and Von Bell last season, who are obviously the starting safeties, but they just didn't use him, I feel like. And He left in free agency. He joined the Commanders, and part of the reason I believe he said that he went there is because he gets to play under, I believe, Dan Quinn is a defensive coordinator. He gets to play under Dan Quinn's system, and obviously Dan Quinn is a great, or is Dan? No, Dan Quinn's the coach. Excuse me, my bad. So he gets to play under Dan Quinn's system. Great defensive mind Dan Quinn is, and I feel like he'll know how to use Jeremy Chin, and he could not only bring him back to the way he was used in his rookie year, where he had great stats, but I feel like just the being in his 5th year, you combine that with being used the right way, and I could see him having a great season behind a pretty solid defense in Washington, at least solid secondary. And then we get another tight end with the Giants. I'm going to go with Daniel Bellinger. I wanted to pick Wan'Dale Robinson or Jalen Hyatt, but I just don't know about the Giants quarterback situation. And I feel like, yes, Bellinger still, gets thrown the ball to by the quarterbacks. I feel like it's a little different at the tight end position because he is that, safety guy. Because the Giants didn't really have a good tight end. They had Darren Waller, who didn't play that much. Bellinger, he's had okay production his first 2 years, but I feel like he'll now be in the position and he'll have a role where he actually can be that guy for Daniel Jones to rely on at the tight end position. And I feel like he can actually have a pretty solid season. I feel like he can have a very similar season, breakout season, to a guy like Adam Troutman. And then we move on to the Lions. I'm actually going with Aleem McNeil, D tackle out of North Carolina State. He was picked in the 3rd round. He didn't play too much his rookie year, but he got a lot of opportunities his 3rd year in the NFL. He had 5 sacks, 30 tackles, 6 TFLs. You have Aiden Hutchinson. They bring in DJ Reader, I'm pretty sure, from the Bengals. McNeil is now the third priority when it comes to offenses and blocking this Lions front. Their secondary seems like it got improved with the guy they brought in from the Bucks. I can't remember his name. And the 2 rookies they drafted, Arnold and I think Rakestraw. Their secondary could improve. Their front is great with Hutchinson and DJ Reader and also Aleem McNeil. I feel like there's going to be no attention on McNeil, and he's just going to have a great season. And that's why I pick him for my Lions breakout player. It was Carlton Davis who they got from the Bucks. Now, for the Packers, I'm going to go with Jaden Reed, 2nd-year receiver out of most notably Michigan State. He also went to Western Michigan as well. He had a very good season. He had 800 yards, 8 touchdowns in just 64 receptions last year, because obviously you have Christian Watson, you have Romeo Doubs, and now you have Jaden Reed with obviously Jordan Love really taking a step up. So I think Jaden Reed's poised for a really good season alongside Doubs and Watson. And then we get to the Bears, where we have safety Jaquan Brisker as my breakout player. He's entering his 3rd year. He's only had 1 pick each of the 2 seasons. He had 3 forced fumbles, but also 100 tackles and 200 tackles and 8 TFLs in his first 2 seasons combined. Their secondary is obviously very good with Jalen Johnson, Tyreek Stevenson. Can't think of their other safety. But I really like Jaquan Brisker. He's obviously got the cool backflip Spider-Man celebration that he does. So, I think with this loaded secondary, I think Jaquan Brisker is definitely poised for a very good third-year season. And lastly, for the NFC North, we have the Vikings. This one may be a surprise. I'm going with Sam Darnold. I think I just saw today that they named him the starter for the season. We all know Sam Darnold has had a very rough beginning to his career. He had a decent start to it, but then he's just kind of fallen off a bit. Now, what I will say about Sam Darnold is the year he had his last year on the Panthers, when he only started 6 games, he had 7 touchdowns in 6 games to only 3 picks. He had a really good offensive line. He had a really good run game. He had DJ Moore to throw to, and he actually had a really good season. Now he has Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, Aaron Jones. Very good coaching. I would not be surprised if Sam Darnold potentially cracks 3,500 passing yards, 20 touchdowns, and stays under 10 picks. Because I'm a Panthers fan. I watched him play. His first year he was there, and he was not good. And then I watched him his second year when he actually had a good team around him. He was actually pretty good for Sam Darnold. Like, only 3 picks in 6 games is very good for Sam Darnold when he's thrown 11 in 12 before. So I would not be surprised if Sam Darnold actually has a really solid season and maybe has a Geno Smith, Ryan Tannehill type resurgence this year. Next, we move to the NFC South, and we have the Falcons, where I'm going with receiver Drake London as the breakout player. I think this is a pretty obvious one. I feel like a lot of people are going to go with this. He hasn't cracked 1,000 yards in his first 2 seasons. Hasn't cracked 5 touchdowns. He's had, obviously, Arthur Smith, who isn't the best coordinator. But now he has a new staff, and obviously, most notably, he has Kirk Cousins as his quarterback instead of Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke. He has Kirk Cousins, who, if he can recover from that injury, is obviously still a really good quarterback. You have still Pitts. They signed Mooney. They obviously still have Bijan. Drake London, I think, could very well have 1,500 yards, 8+ touchdowns this season for the Falcons. Next, we have the Bucs, and I'm going with edge rusher Joe Tryon Shoyinka, I think is how you pronounce it. He was a first-round pick in 2021 from the Bucs, the year after they won the Super Bowl, I think, because he was the 32nd pick. He hasn't gotten above 5 sacks yet in a season. This is kind of like a make-or-break year for him in Tampa. I feel like if he does not produce, they will probably just not pick up his 5th-year option, and they probably will let him go. I feel like this is his season to prove himself, and I just have a feeling that he will do it, and that's why he's my Buccaneers breakout player. Next, for the Saints, we have defensive end or edge rusher Carl Granderson. He's entering his 6th season. He had a pretty good year last year when he actually got to play because he hasn't really started much. He started every game last year and ended up with 8.5 sacks, 78 tackles, and 14 TFLs. Very good season. And I think he's now understanding how to play, and I think I could see him getting double-digit sacks this year and having a very good season, playing opposite of Cam Jordan, who's, I don't know how many years Cam Jordan has left, but I feel like him and Granderson are going to have a pretty good season, and that's why I pick Granderson as my breakout player. Next, we have for the Panthers, you could probably pick a lot of people because no one played very well, but I'm going with Bryce Young, the quarterback. Obviously, first overall pick, did not have a good year, but when you look at the team around him, he had no protection, nobody to throw to outside of 30-year-old or Adam Thielen, who's in his 30s. They now They spent the most money on the O-line this year, getting Robert Hunt and I think Damian Lewis. They trade for Deontay Johnson, draft Xavier Legette, and they have Dave Canales now as the coach, who obviously revived Baker and Geno Smith's careers. Bryce Young is set up to have a really good season. And if he is what they picked him as, there's no reason he doesn't have a good season. And if he has a good season, that's a breakout. And obviously he could have a great season as well. So I think Bryce Young is very much set up to have a good season this year. And who knows, maybe he has a really good season and can shut all the haters up about him. And now we have one more division, which is the NFC West. First, we're going to do the Niners, and I'm going with safety Talanoa Hufanga. He's in his fourth season. He obviously didn't play much his rookie year, but then his second year, that's when he had his breakout. 2 sacks, 4 picks, 97 tackles. Made first team All-Pro. So you can argue that was his breakout. And he started off last year really well, but then he got injured for the year. And I think people aren't really talking about him. They're talking about all the other players on the Niners. McCaffrey, Purdy, Ayuk, Devo, Kittle, Bosa, Fred Warner. No one's really talking about Hufanga. And I think this year he's going to remind everybody why they were talking about him 2 years ago. And that's why he's my Niners breakout player. Then we get to the Rams, and I'm going with edge rusher Byron Young, not to be confused with Bryce Young. Byron Young was a third-round pick last year by the Rams. He had a pretty good year. He had 8 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 8 TFLs, 61 tackles. He was, I think, 8th in Defensive Rookie of the Year voting. He had a very good season. And now I know Aaron Donald's not there anymore, and obviously he takes away a lot of attention from other players like Byron Young to get 8 sacks. But I feel like people may be doubting the Rams' D-line as a whole. I know they drafted Fisk and Verse. And I think people aren't talking about Byron Young like they should be. Maybe they are, and I don't know. But I think Byron Young is going to have an even better season, maybe get 12 sacks, maybe even get 3 forced fumbles, because why not? So he is my breakout player for the Rams. Then we get to the Seahawks, and I'm going with Noah Fant. Now, he's one of the older players on here. He was drafted in 2019. He's now entering his 6th season, 3rd in Seattle. His first year in Seattle, he had 500 yards, 4 touchdowns, which is pretty good. But then he did not find the end zone last year and barely got to 400 yards last year. The offense is still the same. You still have Geno Smith. I could see Noah Fant getting back to his 600-yard season, maybe even 700 that he had in Denver. His highest was 673 in Denver his second year. I could see him getting 705 this year. I do have a lot of tight ends on here, but I think a lot of tight ends are poised. This is going to be the year of the tight ends. And the last team we have is an interesting one. For the Cardinals, I have quarterback Kyler Murray. He's also drafted in 2019. He obviously had the great rookie season. But then, obviously, his 2 years ago, he had that injury, the ACL injury. I think it was an ACL injury. And he wasn't able to play till halfway through his the following season. He had a good year. He only threw 5 touchdowns in 8 games, which maybe isn't the best. But he now has Marvin Harrison Jr. I know they lost Hollywood Brown. You have Trey McBride, James Conner, Marvin Harrison. I am big on Kyler Murray and the Cardinals as a whole. I could see Kyler. People aren't putting Kyler Murray in that borderline top 10 quarterback conversation. I could see him being back into that top 10 quarterback conversation. Because right now he's probably in like the middle, the like mid 10s, like in the 15, 14 range. I could see him getting into that 9 to 10 range after this season. And that's why he's my player for the Cardinals. And that will officially conclude my NFL Breakout Players video, giving the player I think will have a breakout season for every team. Let me know, again, in the comments what you agree with or disagree with. That's the point of this. We want to have sports discussion, so let me know. Tell me what you agree with and disagree with. And also, again, make sure you like the video, subscribe, and also hit that notification bell so you don't miss more amazing content over here at Couch Casual. And I will see you guys again next time. Peace.